Quiet luxury is a term that refers to any item or object that can give you a sense of premiumness and luxury without flaunting it or shouting about it in a very understated and subdued manner. And I feel this car right here, that's the BYD Sealion 7, which is the brand's flagship electric SUV in our market, can deliver on that front both literally and figuratively, as it's all electric and it's a luxury SUV. I'm going to explain exactly why over the course of this review. My name's Nishmanya, you're watching NB Drives. Let's get straight into the way the BYD Sealion 7 drives. And simply put, this car is punchy in terms of performance. There is no hiding the performance figures that this car has. BYD has been touting them for a reason, and that 530 horsepower and 690 newton meters of torque can be felt all the time under your right foot. No matter how fast or slow you're going, there's always enough oomph to get going even faster, if that makes any sense. So just to clarify, the model that I'm driving is the top spec version with the dual motor setup. Hence, it makes the 530 horsepower and 690 newton meters of torque. Though there is a single motor version which is mounted at the rear. It costs about 5 lakhs less and it has about 200 horsepower less. So if performance is what you're seeking, this is the model to go for. Both of them get the same LFP Blade batteries, which are 83 kilowatt hours, fairly large, and that is what's allowed this car to get a real world range that, from my testing, is around 480 odd kilometers. But I've been driving it rather inconsistently. I've been testing performance, but I've also been shooting with it. So there have been times when I've been moving nice and slow through traffic, but there have been times when I've been being a little more spirited with it. This brings me to the second point about this car, is that if you start driving it fast, you are gonna drain the battery so quick. This was most evident as on the first day when I was exploring the performance of this car. I did hustle it around and push it a little hard, and this resulted in me losing nearly 15% of range just in a 20-25 kilometer stretch. So just keep that in mind. If you are going to be driving this car spiritedly, I think you're going to end up getting half the claimed range, maybe even a little lower. So it's worth noting that your range might differ. You might be able to eke more out of it. Now, the performance is truly ballistic, and the fact is that 530 horsepower, despite the fact that this car weighs over 2.4 tons, if you stomp on it, which I can do right now, oof, you get to 60 like that. Like, you need a second and a half of on throttle time for you to get up to the kind of speed limits that we usually have on our city roads. And it's not until you get out on the open highway where you can actually get to the speeds this car is very comfortable cruising at. That is 120 kph. It sits very comfortably at those speeds. Now that I'm on some more open roads, I can tell you about how this feels at speed. And the speed limit out here is about 100 kph. I am currently sitting at about 70, and it feels so at home out here. There is very little by way of side-to-side movement. That's down to the way BYD has built this car. It uses this technology where it integrates the battery cells into the chassis of the car while building it. So that makes it a little more stable and dynamically more capable. There's also very little vertical movements going over some of these really bad bumps on the highway. By bumps, I mean there's just a change in the road surfacing, and many cars, when they're not tuned right, you'll feel a lot of vertical head bobbing. You can feel it. This car is fairly flat. Now, this entire review has been fairly positive till now. However, there are a few things that the Sealion 7 does that I'm not a big fan of. Prime among them is the fact that the entire suspension setup is a little too stiff. I do feel that most of the people using it would like it to be a highway cruiser and be more comfortable in the city. That is where majority of EV usage is going to be. So having a slightly softer setup that allows people to waft over road imperfections, unlike in this where they've rounded the edges off, yes, but you do feel a lot of it inside the cabin, both in terms of road surfaces changing and potholes. It doesn't feel like it can't handle it, it just feels like it should have been a little softer, especially since you have a performance oriented sedan from the same brand in the form of the Seal. They'll also be probably faster and more oriented drivers anyway. I'm going over some really broken patches of road right now, and here is where you can feel how stiff the suspension is. It does jerk you around a fair bit, and as I said, it is rounded off in terms of the bumps not feeling as sharp in the cabin, but you really do move around a lot, and I wish that this was a little softer than it is. I think that would make this a very appealing car for many more buyers that way. But it's not uncomfortable, I'll say that, and you can live with it. And for the kind of performance you have, this makes it more livable, especially compared to something like the Seal, because while that has similar performance figures, it is lower to the ground, it's even more firm, and you're always worried about scraping in that car. I've driven this on a bunch of roads. This one's fairly bad. I've gone over some pretty horrendous speed breakers also, and I've never been worried about it scraping, nor has it scraped. So as long as you drive this reasonably and go on roads that are not, off-road tracks, I think you're good to go. And then on the highways, you can really push it and enjoy it. My other major issue with the car was its braking. Now, I'm not talking about the braking performance itself, because the massive rotors and potent braking system ensured that this car could slow down. My issue was more with the pedal feel, as under heavy braking, it felt like the first 10-15% of the pedal didn't really do much and gave a very spongy sensation. And then after that, it was like all the braking came in at once, making it feel more like an on-off switch rather than a pedal you could modulate. And that wasn't a very confidence-inspiring feel. Now, I always say if you're not comfortable braking hard in a car, you should not be trying to hustle it either, despite how much of a performance and dynamic capability it has. I'll also say that the throttle response was a little subdued. Now, this might be a nice thing for people who are not comfortable with this kind of power or driving really fast EVs, as it gives you a split second to decide whether you want all that performance to come in or you want to back out of the situation. However, in both normal mode and sports mode, there was a half-second delay between you pinning the throttle and the car just taking off. After which point I was really flying. So keep that in mind when you're driving this car around. It may be to your liking and it may not also. Now, just talking about the dynamics of this car, it feels so planted in the way it drives at speed, and you can really get to triple digit speeds and see how comfortable this car is. It doesn't feel like it's moving around too much. It's easy to place. The steering's heavy enough for you to have some sort of feedback, but not so heavy that it feels cumbersome in the city. Obviously, it's an electric unit. And gosh, is it easy to chuck this into corners. It also changes directions really fast. So this is something you'll probably have to get used to if you've not driven a lot of performance EVs, and it can be maybe a little bit too much car for a few people. So you might actually be more comfortable in the lower version with the rear mounted electric motor and just shave off that 200 horsepower. You also save about 115 kgs on weight or something. So it might be the better package. You're also saving 5 lakh rupees, which is no small feat. All in all, I think this is a fun car to drive. If you have performance as your top priority, You'll be able to live with this car, no issues. I really do love the overall performance package of this car. It's put a huge smile on my face every time I've stepped on that throttle. And unlike a lot of EVs where you can feel them run out of steam as you get to the 100 kph mark, 120 kph mark, it feels like it's going breathless and just has no extra performance. Here, even once you're at 100, oof, this car just pins you back. Sorry, I had an open stretch in front of me, so I just floated a little bit. It really does feel like you've got a lot of power, and we have driven cars that have felt as fast, but those cars I'd probably say are in a price tag that's at least 2 times, maybe 2.5 times what this is. You're looking at 1 crore plus for a car that'll pin you back the way this does. I'm yet to drive the Mahindra B6, which is supposed to have good performance, but I did drive the XEV9e, and while that is fast, this makes that look normal in comparison and feel more normal in comparison. So it's just something you should experience. The iX1 feels very sedate in comparison, and I'm really hoping I can get behind the wheel of the EV6, because that's probably gonna be the only other car that'll give me some sort of performance in comparison to this. But even that is nearly 200 horsepower down in terms of just outright power figures. So it'll be interesting to see. Visually, the BYD Sealion 7 is quite a striking car. There's nothing about it that's extremely shouty, and honestly in most colors it goes relatively under the radar for most people. But it's got smart styling cues that you can see have been maybe borrowed by some other established German designers. Hint hint, Porsche. You can see it's got some really slick headlights up here with this nice daytime running light that cuts into the bumper, and it gives it this angularity and muscularity up front. Even these vents up front give it visual width, as it is straight up on both sides, and you have a air dam down here that takes care of the EV's cooling needs. On the side of the Sealion 7, there's a lot to like about the overall look. BYD has done a lot to make this car look sporty, and it really looks like a more puffed up version of its sedan sibling, the Seal. And that can be seen essentially in these character lines, 2 of which I really like. One comes from the front fender all the way to the rear door handle, and the second one's from the tail lights back here. I think it adds a lot of muscularity and makes it look planted. Another thing worth noting, there is a sloping roofline and a rising belt line, so that again adds to the SUV coupe look. And on the side you'll also see there are these really nice looking 20-inch alloy wheels. That is specific to this top trim. The lower variant with the single rear mounted motor only gets 19-inch wheels. And while we're on the side, I'll also mention the door handles. Now these are pop-out style door handles, and I don't usually like how they work, but this one does sort of work well. As you approach the car, you can just click on the button, and they work like regular door handles, not just like buttons or toggles. So that makes it a little more easy to get used to in terms of usage. Round the rear, as you'd expect, the SUV coupe styling continues. There's this really sharply raked rear windshield, which obviously looks really sporty outside, and there's this very well contoured spoiler. That's not the only spoiler at the back here. There's a second lip spoiler on the boot lid here. It looks cool. I think one would have sufficed. I actually really like how this one's got this hollow section below. It looks like the aero is going to actively like flow through it. So that does make it look more sporty. This one we could have done without. Now on the rear, there's also these really well detailed tail lights. I'll show you a close-up of them. They have this really nice honeycomb kind of design going through it, and it makes it look quite premium. Otherwise, the tailgate design's fairly subtle. There's no real major design changes here or creases. The only other thing you see here are the reflector strips with this crease going around. It's like a U shape, And there's this fairly pronounced diffuser down here, which would be functional, but it's finished in this like rugged plastic. I think they could have done that in maybe body color or given some body color accents to make it look a little more sporty. I also want to talk about the overall dimensions of the Sealion 7. This is a flagship SUV, and a lot of people might look at it and be like, doesn't look all that big, maybe like a stretched crossover. But in terms of its on paper dimensions, this is over 4.8 meters long and 2 meters wide. That makes it really large, and no amount of visual design and engineering, which I will give credit to BYD, they have done to mask its overall size, will get rid of how big it actually sits and rides on the road. So it definitely has some presence to it. Step inside the cabin of the BYD Sealion 7 and you'll be greeted with a very pleasant and premium feeling interior. Honestly, I was not expecting this level of quality and fit and finish in here. My last experience with BYD was back in 2019 or 2020 when I drove the E6, which was that commercial MPV kind of thing. And that was around 30 lakhs. So this being about another 25 lakh more expensive, I was expecting it to be nicer, but I wasn't blown away by that interior. Here I am truly very impressed. You have so much soft touch plastic in here, like on top of the dashboard, out here on the lower sections of the dashboard also. It's got this rubberized soft touch finish which feels really nice. And then you have so much leather inside here also. Like out here in the center console, again soft touch. It's got like a foam layer underneath. The seats are really nice. Obviously, again the same leather carries over. Even the center armrest has this nice cushioning to it, doesn't feel too harsh. And even your door cards, the top of them are leather wrapped, lower part has that same rubberized finish. However, there are some cheaper plastics in the cabin. Lower down out here, you can see there's some scratchy plastics, and even around the door card. However, there's a little rubber mat that they've put where the water bottle holder is in the door card. So it shouldn't make as much of a ruckus as just plain hard plastic. There's just so much equipment and features that's been packed into this cabin of the Sealion 7, and prime among them is this 15.6-inch touchscreen infotainment system that is laptop sized, and honestly it just dominates the dashboard. Now there's a lot of stuff baked into this screen as there's not a whole lot of physical switches. Though BYD has been kind enough to give you like your hazard switches, your parking assist switches, more toggles, and even a quick access to your AC controls down here on this capacitive touch panel kind of thing. And there's some rockers. Even your volume control has this really nicely knurled dial, which is very nice to use and feels very premium. Now back to the screen, it's got a party trick, which essentially you usually can use it as a landscape screen, but if you press this button out here, the screen rotates and becomes like a vertical tablet. And for anyone who's never experienced this, it can really wow a lot of your friends. So it's a neat trick. Other functionality baked into the screen, let's put it back into landscape mode. You have your different assists, your climate control settings, all of which you can basically tweak in here. So your fan speed, temperatures, you have 2-zone climate control out here. And even things like your seat ventilation are accessed through this climate control screen. I'm not a big fan of that. I just wish there was like a physical switch that I could press. I will note this is one of the best seat ventilation systems I've used on any car so far. It is really cold and very fast. So it really cools you down in a matter of seconds, not even minutes. And I do really appreciate that being part of the feature set. You also get this really nice digital instrument cluster which has been neatly integrated into this dashboard. The layered dashboard looks really cool, and this doesn't feel like a afterthought where a screen's just been whacked onto it. It's sort of mimicking the same design as this backlit element on the left, but the screen is quite clear. It's got fairly legible fonts. And something I really love about this is that if you're using Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, both of which are available wirelessly on this screen, the maps do transfer over to the instrument cluster. And that's really convenient because when you're moving along the road, that means you have to glance less onto the big screen and you can just keep your eyes straight up ahead and just glance for directions down here. You also get a really comprehensive head-up unit. It's very bright, very easy to read, and you get basic turn directions in there, which is another reason you don't have to look away. But the reason I've been saying you don't have to look away so often is because there's sort of like a class monitor kind of situation with this sensor up here, which constantly keeps an eye on the driver. And if you ever glance away from the road, or down at the dials, or even to change any modes, the system really quickly catches you and then it reprimands you by telling you, hey, focus up, you need to look back onto the road. And I feel like that's a double standard because BYD has put so much stuff into the infotainment system. So anything you want to control has to be done through here. And the second you look away, the car is immediately there to correct you. I feel like either this system needs to be a little more lenient, or there needs to be less stuff baked into the screen and more physical switches that you can just reach out and fix things with. Also quickly want to give a shout out to the Dyne Audio sound system in the Sealion 7. It is really well tuned. I was very pleasantly surprised with it. It's got a very balanced and well curated sound stage. It doesn't feel like it's too punchy or too top heavy. It feels extremely well calibrated, and that's something I've noticed a lot of car makers have not been able to get quite right. Sometimes they go too bass heavy, sometimes the systems sound too tinny. This has a very good balance of both, and it really ups the quality level in here. Before we move to the rear, it's also worth pointing out that these seats are really comfortable. They're essentially these bucket style electrically adjusted seats. Both the front seats have electric adjustment. It's just the driver gets, I think, 14-way adjustment, while the passenger only gets 6-way adjustment. It's not bad, but it's something to keep an eye on. And it gives you plenty of support. I initially thought it would be a little too narrow and hug me too tight. I am a big guy, and I do find that most bucket seats are a little uncomfortable for me, but for the last day that I've been driving it, the seats have been pretty darn comfortable for me. The thud of these doors is so reassuring. I am very impressed with the build quality of this car. And back here you will be greeted with a very nice seat. The cushioning is very soft, and there's this little bit of bolstering on both the outer seats that sort of hugs you and keeps you in place, gives you a sense that this is a little more performance oriented than a lot of SUVs you might be stepping into. Now, apart from the fact that the materials back here feel really good, which is a big plus, both in terms of the leather here, the leather wrapped finish on the center console rear, then even your door cards, soft touch materials continue back here. And as many of you might know, I've pointed this out on a few premium cars, that the sense of quality doesn't always translate and continue over to the rear. The iX1 long wheelbase was one of the cars where I felt like the quality didn't dip, but something like the Kodiaq, I was a little disappointed that the plastics became quite scratchy in the back also, while the front was soft touch materials. Now, I am 6 foot tall. This is set to my driving position, and you can see I have a reasonable amount of knee room. I'd say about 5 inches of knee room, which is quite impressive. And I can sort of tuck my feet under the front seat for a more comfortable laid back experience. Headroom for me is about 2 inches if I'm if I'm sitting normally. If I'm reclined, that does reduce a little. You have to remember this is a SUV coupe and the roofline is tapering. That said, it's not too bad, and I really like the angle of recline on these seats, which makes it quite comfortable for long drives. Now, back here you also have this nice armrest, which is again ergonomically very well positioned. You've got a set of cup holders in here very neatly integrated, and there's a little bit of storage in here. Not much that you can put in there, maybe a notepad, maybe a phone, not a whole lot else. Each of the 3 seats here have a 3-point seat belt, and they have an independent headrest. And because this floor is completely flat, if I move over to the center, you'll see I'm fairly comfortable. I won't say this is the most comfortable seat because the cushioning is a little hard in the middle because of that armrest we just spoke about. But I have enough space. This is a wide car, nearly 2 meters long, and here also I'm good on headroom because I'm sitting a little forward, and there's just one big glass roof. Now I'll also say that this all black cabin can be a little tight feeling in other cars, but because there's such a huge roof out here, it honestly gives a very nice open feel to the car. And I really think you do need the panoramic glass roof. Otherwise you might feel a little hemmed in out here, especially shorter people, because this window line does rise, and if you do get a little car sick, that doesn't bode well for these rear seats. I'll also point out there are few amenities missing here. So while you do get 2 AC vents back here which you can direction, there is no third climate zone at the rear. And apart from the 2 USB outlets, there is no 12-volt socket. So if you need more charging, well, you're sort of limited to just those 2 things. You don't get any mounts for your tablets back here, so no entertainment package. And unlike many cars in this segment that have integrated sunblinds, there is nothing here, which is a bit of a miss because in our Indian summers, which get really hot and the sun really beats down on you, you'll want a way to stay away from the sun. There is a level of tinting all around the car from the factory, but I still don't think that's enough for you to not have blinds. And most people are going to have to resort to those stick-on blinds, which isn't a very premium feel for an otherwise top-notch cabin. Coming to the boot of the BYD Sealion 7, you get 500 liters of space back here, and it's a relatively flat loading area, which is a nice thing to have. Now I know this isn't much of a representation, but this is my camera bag that is about 28 liters in volume, and you can see how puny it looks in this big boot. Additionally, it's also worth noting that there is a Dynaudio speaker back here as well as a subwoofer integrated in here for the really good quality sound that I spoke about. And there's a storage netting to keep some stuff here, as well as a nice bag hook that you can put groceries on so that your grocery bag doesn't roll around. Very cool. Now there is a little bit of storage under here as well, and that you can access basically through popping up. Now I'll show you that a little closer now. Besides that, you can also fold the rear 2 seats flat. It's a 60-40 split, and you get boot lighting in the rear, which makes it easier to load stuff in at night. Additionally, you get another 58 liters of storage up front. I'll just show you that in a second. You can access the front boot by a latch just under the steering wheel, and when you open it up, there are hydraulic struts to help open the frunk, or front trunk as some call it, and you're greeted with 58 liters of space, which is just about enough for a big backpack or maybe a small handbag. To sum up the BYD Sealion 7, there is a lot here as a package. This car gives you one of the best bang for your bucks when you look at performance. 530 horsepower, 690 Newton meters of torque in a car that's priced around 55 lakh ex showroom. That's almost unheard of, and I don't think you can find a better power to price ratio in the market right now. Then there's the fact that you can get a almost 500 kilometer real world range out of this, if you drive sensibly, that is, and don't just go around flooring the throttle every chance you get, even though it might be tempting. All that considered, there are a few drawbacks and niggles here and there, as I pointed out over the course of the review. And what all this gets me to is the fact that at the end of the day, this does give you that sense of quiet luxury, as only people who know about EVs and the market will know that this car exists and how good it is. The interiors feel top notch, and honestly, having been fortunate enough to be in cars around the 50-60 lakh bracket of late, I've been in quite a few of them. This actually has one of the best touch points and fit and finish interiors I've seen in the last couple of months. And there's also the fact that it is a very reliable battery pack. BYD actually offers its battery to Mahindra. The blade cells are world class, and I know you're thinking it doesn't have the flash value of something like the BMW iX1 long wheelbase, or even the snob value of something like the Tesla Model Y, which is considered to be a pioneer in the EV space. But don't forget, BYD has been at the electric game really long, and they are the largest EV car maker in the world in terms of sheer volumes. And that brings a lot of expertise to the table. It shouldn't be dismissed, and at the very least, you guys should consider it. However, if you're looking for another electric SUV coupe but at a lower price point, check out my review of the Mahindra XEV 9e here. Until next time, cheers!